When the human heart finds its half, not even chaos can break this union. Billy Thompson had been working his land since dawn, as he had done every day for 15 years. Sweat dripped down his Texas sunburned face as he mended the fence separating his property from the main road. His calloused hands knew every stone, every plank, every strand of wire on that farm he had built with his own effort. He was a simple man, of few words, but with a generous heart. The wind was blowing stronger than usual that September afternoon, kicking up clouds of red dust that danced across the barren landscape. The mountains in the distance seemed to flutter in the heat, like mirages playing with tired eyes. Billy paused for a moment, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and looked up at the sky. Dark clouds were gathering on the horizon, promising a storm that could bring relief or destruction. It was then that the horsemen appeared on the road. There were 6 men mounted, their wide hats casting shadows on faces marked by time and circumstance. They rode in formation with the confidence of those who know each trail in that territory. Billy immediately recognized what they were, even from a distance. There was something in the way they moved, in the rigid posture, in the silence that enveloped them. The group passed his property without looking to the sides, heading towards the center of the city of Cedar Falls. Billy felt a tightness in his chest, an intuition that grew like the storm in the sky. He dropped his tools and walked to the porch of his house, watching the nights disappear into the dust. Cedar Falls was a small, sleepy town where everyone knew each other by name. It had a main street with a few shops, a modest hotel, the white church at the end of the avenue, and the bank that served the farmers in the area. It was the kind of place where news traveled fast, and where the arrival of strangers always drew attention. Billy knew that his intuition rarely failed. Years of living in this savage land had sharpened his survival instincts. He went back indoors, washed his hands in the metal basin, and changed his shirt. Something inside him said that he should go to the city, even though he couldn't explain why. The journey to Cedar Falls took 20 minutes on horseback. Billy saddled up his faithful companion, a chestnut horse named Thunder, and set off down the dusty road. The wind was still strong, making the dry vegetation dance on both sides of the path. The sky gradually darkened, not only by storm clouds, but also by evening. As he approached the city, Billy noticed an unusual movement. People ran through the streets, some carrying belongings, others just running with no apparent direction. Screams echoed in the air, mixed with the sound of horses and wood being broken. Billy's heart raced as he spurred Thunder to increase speed. When he reached the entrance of the city, the scene before him confirmed his worst fears. The 6 horsemen he had seen passing by his farm were scattered on the main street. They didn't seem interested in causing unnecessary destruction, but their presence had turned quiet Cedar Falls into a place of fear and confusion. Billy dismounted and tied Thunder to a pole near the barber shop. He moved carefully through the shadows, trying to make sense of the situation without drawing attention to himself. His experienced eyes evaluated every move, every person, every possible way out. That's when he saw her. A young woman was leaning against the wall of the hotel, clearly frightened and shaking. Her brown hair escaped her hairstyle, and her hands nervously pressed a blue shawl against her chest. She looked around with eyes that Billy recognized immediately. They were the eyes of someone desperately searching for safety, for someone to trust. Without a second thought, Billy approached her. They didn't exchange words at first, but something passed between them. A quiet understanding, a connection that transcended circumstances. She looked him in the eye, and in that instant, Billy knew he would do anything to protect her. Chaos continued around them, but at that moment, in the midst of confusion and fear, 2 souls found in each other the promise that they would not be alone. Billy held out his hand to her, a simple gesture that carried all the weight of a silent promise. And so began a story that would forever change the lives of 2 people on a stormy afternoon in Cedar Falls, when fate decided to write one of its most touching chapters. Billy held the woman's hand firmly, feeling the tremor that ran through his entire body. She looked at him with a mixture of fear and hope, as if he were the only solid thing in a world that was collapsing around him. Wordlessly, he guided her to the back of the hotel, where the shadows offered protection from prying eyes. Sarah Mitchell had arrived in Cedar Falls just the week before, coming from Denver to care for her ailing aunt. She had never imagined that her quiet life as a teacher could be interrupted by men like those who now controlled the city. Her hands were still shaking as Billy wrapped his own, conveying a calm she didn't know where it came from. The two hid behind a pile of wooden crates, watching the movement on the main street through a small opening. The fugitives seemed to be looking for something specific, not just causing mayhem for fun. They walked in and out of stores with purpose, asking questions that no one could hear clearly from a distance. Billy noticed that the leader of the group was a tall, grey-bearded man who carried a natural authority even in his questionable actions. He seemed to know the city, as if he had been there before. This intrigued Billy, who knew virtually every face that passed through Cedar Falls. Sarah pressed more against Billy when one of the men passed near their hideout. She could feel the warmth emanating from his body, the smell of earth and honest work that was in stark contrast to the fear that dominated the atmosphere. There was something comforting about Billy's presence, something that made her feel that, perhaps, everything would be okay. Time passed slowly as they watched the situation unfold. Billy kept Sarah protected with his body, always alert for any suspicious movement. He could smell her soft scent, mixed with the smell of dust and tension that hung in the air. It was strange how, even in the midst of chaos, his presence brought a sense of peace that he hadn't experienced in years. Gradually, the fugitives began to regroup in front of the bank. They exchanged a few words with each other, gestures that indicated that they had found what they were looking for or decided that it was time to leave. The leader looked around one last time, as if memorizing every detail of the city before making a sign to the others. Billy felt Sarah relax slightly when he realized that the men were preparing to leave, but he kept his watch, knowing that moments like these could change quickly. His experience at the border had taught him that prudence was always the best companion. One by one, the horsemen mounted their horses and headed for the exit of the city. They left the same way they arrived, silent, organized, leaving behind only dust and relieved people. The sound of his horse's hooves gradually faded into the distance, swallowed up by the wind that continued to blow hard. Only when Billy was sure that the men were completely gone did he allow himself to relax. Sarah remained close to him, not out of fear now, but out of an attraction they both felt, but didn't know how to express. They looked each other in the eye. And at that moment, speechless, they understood that something had changed between them. Billy helped Sarah to her feet, her hands remaining together longer than necessary. They walked together back to Main Street, where the residents of Cedar Falls were beginning to come out of hiding. People greeted each other in relief, checking that everyone was okay, sharing their experiences of the scare they had gone through. Sarah realized that she didn't know anyone in town other than her aunt, who was probably worried at home. Billy, realizing her situation, offered to accompany her there. They walked through the still tense streets of Cedar Falls, past windows that opened cautiously and doors that unlocked piecemeal. Along the way, Sarah told Billy about her life in Denver, how she had become a teacher, and about the decision to come and take care of her elderly aunt. Billy listened intently, sharing details about his farm, about how he had arrived in Texas years ago in search of a fresh start. They discovered unexpected affinities, similar tastes, dreams that complemented each other. Sarah's aunt's house was at the end of Main Street, a modest white-painted wooden building with a small fence around it. When they reached the door, Sarah hesitated before entering. She turned to Billy, searching for words to express her gratitude, but also reluctant to say goodbye. Billy understood that hesitation. He also felt an uncanny reluctance to let her go, as if something important would be lost if they parted at that moment. The sky had completely darkened, and the first drops of rain were beginning to fall, bringing with them the smell of wet earth that heralded the storm. Sarah's aunt appeared at the door, relieved to see her niece safe. It was a small, white-haired woman who immediately invited Billy to come in and take shelter from the rain that was beginning to intensify. He accepted the invitation, more for the opportunity to spend more time with Sarah than for the need for shelter. Inside the cozy house, between cups of hot coffee and conversations about the day's events, Billy and Sarah discovered that what had been born between them during those tense hours was something real, something worth exploring. The storm outside mirrored the transformation taking place in their hearts, washing away fear and revealing possibilities that neither of them had imagined when they woke up that morning. The days following the incident brought an unexpected routine for Billy Thompson. He went on to visit Sarah and her Aunt Martha's house almost every day, always with a practical excuse, fixing a door hinge, checking the roof after the storm, or bringing fresh groceries from his farm. But everyone knew that the real reason was Sarah's smile and the long conversations that went on until nightfall. Sarah had also found reasons to prolong these meetings. She brewed stronger coffee, baked breads that filled the house with warm aromas, and always discovered a new story about her life in Denver to share. Martha watched the blossoming of that romance with wise eyes, remembering her own youth and the love she had found decades ago in that very town. Billy brought his hammer and nails on Thursday morning, determined to fix the porch steps that creaked under any weight. Sarah watched him from the kitchen window, admiring the precision of his movements, the way his hard-working hands turned problems into solutions. There was something deeply comforting about seeing a man who knew how to take care of things, who built rather than destroyed. While Billy worked, Sarah prepared a pitcher of fresh water with lemon wedges, remembering how he had enjoyed this drink a few days earlier. She stepped out onto the balcony, offering him a glass and taking the opportunity to get closer. The morning sun created a golden atmosphere around them, and the scent of the wildflowers that grew in Martha's garden mingled with the smell of freshly cut wood. Billy gratefully accepted the water, his fingers brushing against Sarah's during the glass change. This touch, simple and brief, sent a stream of warmth through both of them. They talked about plans for the garden, about the arrival of autumn, about small things that gained importance when shared between people who cared about each other. Martha watched the scene from the living room, smiling to herself. She had lost her husband 15 years ago and knew how to recognize true love when she saw him. There was something special about the way Billy looked at Sarah, as if she was the answer to a question he didn't even know he was asking. And Sarah shone in his presence, like a flower that had finally found the right soil to flourish. The afternoon brought clouds that promised more rain, and Billy decided to speed up his work on the porch. Sarah insisted on helping, holding nails and passing tools, creating a synchronized dance that felt natural to both of them. Their hands met frequently during these exchanges, and each encounter lasted a little longer than the last. By the time the first drop of rain fell, Billy had finished repairs. The balcony was solid again, the steps firm and quiet. But neither Billy nor Sarah wanted the day to end. Martha, realizing the situation, suggested that Billy stay for dinner, as the rain was intensifying and the road to his farm could become dangerous in the dark. The kitchen table had never looked so cozy. Martha prepared her famous beef stew with vegetables, while Sarah made cookies that melted in your mouth. Billy contributed stories about his farm, about the challenges of working the land alone, about the small triumphs that made each day valuable. Sarah shared memories of her classes in Denver, the children she had taught, the dreams she had cultivated for her life. As the night progressed, the conversation became more intimate. Billy talked about his arrival in Texas, about the hardships of the early years, about the loneliness that had become his constant companion until recently. Sarah opened her heart about the expectations she had left behind in Denver, about the courage it took to start over in a new place, about how Cedar Falls was starting to feel more like home than any other place had ever seemed. Martha left early, claiming tiredness, but actually wanting to give privacy to the couple that flourished before her eyes. Billy and Sarah found themselves alone in the living room, the fire in the fireplace creating dancing shadows on the walls. The sound of rain providing a perfect soundtrack to whispered confidences. Sarah approached Billy on the couch, her knees touching lightly as they talked. He could feel her warmth, see the little freckles that dotted his nose, watch as her eyes sparkled in the firelight. There was a growing intimacy between them, a sense that they were walking towards something inevitable and beautiful. Billy reached out and gently touched Sarah's face, his calloused fingers contrasting with her soft skin. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, leaning into the touch, allowing herself to fully feel that connection that had grown between them since the day of the incident in town. When she opened her eyes again, they met up with Billy's, and at that moment they both knew they had crossed an invisible line. It was no longer just two strangers who helped each other during a crisis. They had become something more, something that deserved to be protected and cultivated. The rain kept falling outside, washing the world and preparing it for a new dawn. Inside the cozy home, two souls had found in each other not only companionship, but the promise of a shared future. Billy knew that his lonely life on the farm had come to an end. Sarah knew that her search for a true home was finally over. They remained like this, close to each other, talking in whispers until fatigue overcame them. Billy fell asleep on the couch. Sarah covered him with a blanket before retiring to his room. But they both knew that something fundamental had changed that night. Something that would forever transform the course of their lives in Cedar Falls. The dawn brought with it a clarity that only nights of transformation can provide. Billy woke up on the couch to the aroma of fresh coffee and bacon wafting from the kitchen, accompanied by the soothing sound of Sarah preparing breakfast. He stood up, carefully folded the blanket she had placed over him, and walked to the kitchen, where he found her quietly humming a tune he couldn't recognize. Sarah turned when she noticed his presence, her hair still loose from the braids of the night before, creating a golden frame around her face illuminated by the morning light. She smiled in a way that made Billy's heart race, a smile that carried the promise of many more sunrises together. He moved closer, accepting the cup of coffee she offered him, his fingers lingering on the encounter once more. Martha appeared in the kitchen a few minutes later, watching the couple with silent approval. She had spent the night listening to the murmur of their conversations, the soft sound of two people discovering that they had found something precious in each other. Over breakfast, she watched as they moved around each other with a natural synchronization, as if they had been a family for years. After breakfast, Billy knew he needed to return to his farm to take care of the animals and the chores he had left behind. But this time, as he was preparing to leave, Sarah asked to accompany him. She wanted to know the place where he had built his life, to see with her own eyes the work of his hands, to better understand the man who had captured her heart. The ride to Billy's farm was a revelation for Sarah. She rode the tame mare he brought especially for her, watching the landscape unfold in front of her. Billy's lands stretched as far as the eye could see, golden fields that rippled in the wind, cattle grazing peacefully in the morning sun. It was a territory that spoke of hard work, perseverance, and dreams fulfilled through determination. Billy showed Sarah every corner of his property with evident pride. The house he had built with his own hands, the barn where he kept the equipment, the corrals where he took care of the cattle. Sarah saw not only physical structures, but the reflection of Billy's character in every carefully planned detail. It was home to a man who valued simplicity, functionality, and the honest beauty of things done well. Over lunch on the porch of Billy's house, they talked about the future in a way they hadn't allowed themselves before. Sarah talked about how she felt at peace in that place, about how she could imagine a life there. Billy shared his dreams of expanding the farm, of maybe raising a family, of having someone to share the victories and challenges of working the land with. The afternoon brought a decision that they both knew was inevitable. Sarah didn't want to go back to Denver. His life was there now, with Billy, caring for Martha, being part of the community of Cedar Falls. Billy, for his part, could no longer imagine his life without Sarah by his side, without her morning smiles, without her conversations at the end of the day, without the sense of completeness that she brought to his existence. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Billy took Sarah's hand between his. They were sitting on the porch, watching the cattle return to the corral, listening to the familiar sounds of the farm getting ready for the night. It was the perfect time for the words that had been growing in his heart since that turbulent afternoon in Cedar Falls. Billy was not a man of grand speeches or elaborate statements. He was direct, honest, and his words came out of the heart without unnecessary adornment. He told Sarah that he loved her, that he wanted to build a life with her, that his farm only made sense if she was there to share it. Sarah responded with tears in her eyes and a whispered yes that carried the full weight of a decision that would change their lives forever. The preparations for the wedding were simple, like everything else in Billy and Sarah's lives. The ceremony took place at the White Church of Cedar Falls, with Martha as the proud godmother and the entire community as witness. The pastor spoke about the love that is born from adversity, about how two people can find in each other the strength to face any storm. Sarah moved to Billy's farm shortly after the wedding, bringing with her only her clothes, her teacher's books, and Martha, who didn't want to be alone in the city. The house, which had once echoed with the silence of solitude, was filled with laughter, conversation, and the sound of a family that had formed in the most unexpected ways. The months that followed brought a happiness that neither of them had imagined possible. Sarah found that she loved life on the farm, helping Billy with chores, tending the garden they planted together, teaching the children in the area who came to seek education even in the middle of the border. Billy found that sharing his life multiplied all the joys and shared all the worries. Martha flourished on the farm, finding purpose in taking care of the house and advising the young couple when needed. She often watched Billy and Sarah working together in the fields or chatting on the porch at dusk, and smiled remembering how it had all started on that scary afternoon when the fugitives passed through Cedar Falls. When their first wedding anniversary arrived, Billy and Sarah were expecting their first child. They sat on the same balcony where they had decided to stay together, watching the same sunset that had witnessed their first declaration of love. Billy placed his hand on Sarah's rounded belly, feeling the movement of the new life they had created together. Sarah covered Billy's hand with her own, remembering the words he had whispered on that first day of terror and protection. He had promised that she should hold on to him no matter what. And she had done just that, discovering that sometimes the best things in life are born from the most unexpected moments. The wind blew gently across the golden fields, carrying with it the scent of wildflowers and the promise of many seasons to come. Billy and Sarah had found more than love in each other. They had found a home, a family, and the certainty that together they could weather any storm the future brought. And so, under the endless Texas sky, two lives that have met in chaos have discovered that true love doesn't need grand gestures or elaborate words. Sometimes it grows quietly, like plants in the field, fueled by daily affection, mutual trust, and the simple decision to choose one another every day, no matter what. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like to show us you liked it. Share this video with someone who appreciates good stories from the Wild West. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of the upcoming adventures we're going to tell you. Activate the notification bell and always be the first to follow our exciting narratives.